Welcome to episode 9 of the Nightmare Hour, where we're going to talk about sweets for the sweet. See, I just brought it straight up. No, like, tinting, nothing. If you know
Nothing.
that quote, you know what we're talking about today. And I'm Eric. And as always, I'm here with my lovely friend, Adam.
Hi, Eric.
See, you're
My
just
lovely
as late as
friend.
I am. See, it's harder to respond than you think it is. Like, I'm
My
always late and I sound like an idiot, but it's not that
oh,
easy. You're
it's
like,
not that
do I
easy.
go?
Yeah, but yeah, I was just eating a piece of candy over here.
Mm-hmm.
hmm And
Which don't
man,
let
it
me
was
forget.
good.
Don't let me forget like that scene where she finds the candy. I have questions. So don't let me forget to ask the questions when we talk about that part.
Okay. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about 1992's Candyman, written and directed by Bernard Rose.
Which is a great name, right?
Yeah, Bernard Rose is
Bernie
a.
Rose.
It's a very uh, British sounding name because
It
he's a very
is.
British man.
I
Um,
just picked like he has like felt suits or no, not felt. Felt is really cheap. That's like what kids use. Like
Velvet, velour,
yes, thank you. Yeah.
which
Like and
both
he's got like ascots. You know he
ascots.
does.
What's ascots?
It's like what Fred wears in Scooby Doo. It's like a
Oh yeah,
tie that you
oh
like stuff in.
100%, 100%. He
Yeah.
has those. I'm trying to see what else he's done. Um,
Not much.
I mean,
I looked.
he's worked a lot, so I'm guessing he's done a lot in England. But like in terms of
I didn't recognize any of the.
movies we
I
might
just
have
yeah.
seen, I don't really recognize any of these. I mean, he did Anna Karina in 1997, which maybe is very popular, and I don't know. Um, I don't. I think this movie Paper House was his like lead into this, which is how he got the job, I think. But yeah, so regardless, he ran into, as the legend is told, Bernard
The
Rose,
urban legend.
the urban legend. Um, Mr. Rose met Mr. Clive Barker, and Clive had just finished the movie we talked about a couple weeks ago, 1990's Nightbreed. So I'm guessing this probably would have been going into production, or at least like scripting, probably in 1990. I'm guessing. Um, so they met somewhere around that time frame, and he talked about his love for the story The Forbidden, which was in a collection of short stories that Clive wrote called The Books of Blood, and that was released in 1984. And then Clive sold him the rights to The Forbidden, and Bernard Rose took the that story, which was originally set in Liverpool. Interesting that Mr. Rose updated it because they're both English men,
Yeah.
and the movie was still like heavily like rooted in about segregation and poor urban areas of Liverpool. But I guess what struck, and maybe I could have done more research about Bernard Rose, and maybe he lived
I mean,
in Chicago
all
for a long time, but
maybe. I'll,
um, but yeah, we'll get into a little bit more about like what he. I don't think he changed too much. Honestly, I didn't read the short story, so I fucked up there. But this movie was released in 1992 by TriStar. It's got a 6.6 on IMDb. It's got a 74% Rotten Tomatoes and 61% Metacritic. Made on a budget of about $8 million. It grossed $26 million and garnered 2 sequels and an upcoming remake sequel from Nia DaCosta.
yeah,
Jordan
which
Peele.
I'm excited about. Like that little the shadow puppet trailer that came out recently.
Yeah,
That was amazing on its own. Like
yeah,
I'll just watch that movie over and over again.
yeah. So this movie, well, let's talk about our. I think we always get into our personal origins of the film.
Hmm.
Um,
Personal origins.
but yeah, like, was this a movie like you had seen? Did you see it in 1992? Did you love it in 1992,
I
or was
think
it one that you pushed off for a while?
yeah, I think like I believe again, I'm old, but I believe I saw it in like the theatrical like release, the original, and went and saw it. And I think that's the only time I saw it until recently. And I don't think I was in the maturity or the mind space to really understand what this movie is doing. I just
Mm-hmm.
really remember being put off by like the third act in this film, like as a whatever I would have been, 14-year-old or whatever, 13-year-old, because it just got so outside of what horror was to me at that point. Like it got a little more cerebral, and we could talk about that more or now if you want. But like as a young person, like a teenager, I don't think it really hit what the intentions were and what makes this movie so great. So I honestly grew up not thinking that this was that great of a movie, and then reading more about it and finding it more interesting, and then watching it in prep for this, I'm just like, this is legitimately a great movie. Like it stands up way. It's way better than I remember it being. It's stronger than I imagined it being. I was really impressed with this movie. What about you? When did you see it?
I don't think I actually saw this movie for quite a long time because so in the 90s, I like a lot of us purchased a lot of comic books, in particular a lot of Marvel comic books, where there was a lot of advertising done. I'm sure still done by the studios today, but it wasn't like today. You'll see advertisements for like the next big Marvel movie in the Marvel comic book you're reading.
Yeah.
You'll rarely see Candyman and the newest edition of X-Men. But back then I still have like probably a case full of comic books that either in the back inside or the back cover was a full like Candyman ad, or right in the middle of the book where they did those little ads was a Candyman ad. And it scared the shit out of me. It was just like, why is this in the middle of X-Men? I have no idea, and it's very scary to me. As that I would have been like probably like 7 or something at that time. So I did not see this movie. This was one like that kind of put me off for a long time, and I knew that somehow not seeing the film, and I don't think this was like, I mean, this predates the internet quite a bit. Somehow I still knew like Candyman. So I think like the story generated an actual urban legend in my life, or at least in my like schoolyard. So yeah, I for probably until like a couple of years ago, when I revisited it, I didn't really recall seeing it. I know I did see it when I was in like my teens. I finally did see it like when I was like 17 or 18. But I didn't really think I liked it. I think it was probably on TV. So pretty edited, and I don't know. This movie is all pretty much subtextual, and it's not like an in-your-face horror film, even though it is pretty scary and intense. It's not like it's not it's not the movie that a 18-year-old typically wants to watch.
No,
especially you're talking like an 18-year-old 20 years ago. It's not like it's just not what you expect from the horror of this time.
And it's still pretty early in my like horror development when I saw it. So I was seeing slashers and like the things that were really popular around that time. And this is something completely different than that, So I think it just caught me off guard at that point in my life.
Yeah. Did you? So I bought. There's a new Scream Factory. Did a new remaster, and that's what I watched. It's incredible. It's the unrated version, which we discovered is mostly gore and some alternate shots. It's not really anything heavily story. But I watched that. It's from the original negative, uncut, original version. It's not labeled as a director's cut, but I would imagine it would have been the original cut because no one's trying to film something and then push in or around the effect you shot. However, the movie remains mostly the same, so I'm guessing Bernard Rose doesn't really care that much. But this movie, especially in like a 2019, when I first revisited it, and even more so in a 2020 lens, is like, holy shit, this movie made in the early 90s is incredibly smart. And then you look at like, well, he wrote the short story in 1984. It's like, holy shit, like these guys were, well, Clive Barker's always been, into smart horror, or what do they call it today? They call it elevated horror. He's always been in elevated horror. But you see Bernard Rose, who again, like like, it didn't even look like he's made a horror film after this.
Yeah.
It looks like he
And
did stuff like Anna Karina, and it was like,
yeah.
it's a very classically told story, a very like tightly told story. But
It feels like an urban legend story, like unwinding as it goes. Like it's slow, and then there's the the call's
yeah,
coming from inside the house part of the movie, and yeah, it feels very, I think, intentionally like created as like an urban legend pacing, if that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, I love it. Actually, it's this movie did not deserve the treatment that I gave it for so many
Yeah.
years of being scared of it and being
Yeah.
like, well, and I've never seen the sequels, so I can't. Maybe they suck. Maybe they're good. Have you seen any of the sequels?
No, I haven't. Like I said, like my 12-year-old me, or however old, 12, 13-year-old me apologizes profusely for not really revisiting this and giving this movie the love it deserves, because I was impressed. So obviously I didn't watch the sequels because I was like, nah.
Well, or the reviews they're not so great.
They
But
usually aren't.
Yeah, they do. They do both have Tony Todd in them, and they both probably they don't really go with Helen at all, which is kind of weird.
Oh yeah,
Because
because she gets her own legend at the end.
I mean, yeah, she's
The original.
arguably the new main character. But
I will say one criticism, like saying Candyman 5 times is creepy. Watching a man say Helen 5 times into a mirror, not as scary.
You are correct. It is not as scary. I can't recall when I actually saw it, but I would say it was probably around like 1999 or 2000. And it just didn't really resonate with me. For whatever reason, it was either a shitty VHS, probably pan and scan version of the movie, or it was on TV, probably like Sci-Fi Channel or something. So probably heavily edited. But the legend held with me for a number of years, and only probably until like the last. I mentioned it had okay reviews. I mean, those reviews aren't incredible. I mean, 74% is very good, but it's not just it's not an incredibly well reviewed film. It didn't make a ton of money, even though it did spawn a couple sequels. In the 90s, it wasn't very hard to get a direct-to-video sequel. I believe the second one did go to theaters, and the third one went straight to video. But that was pretty regular for that time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we can look at revisit our 45 Amityville movies that they made in the 90s for that. But what was interesting is that this has garnered so much attention in the last decade or so, and then of course we have the upcoming semi-sequel remake hybrid type of thing, which I'm excited for. But we're going to talk about the original. Sorry to get off sidetracked.
Oh, our whole podcast is a sidetrack. Like, there's no track. We walk all over. Like, ooh, this is this. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that.
The most interesting sidetrack to me is that originally Bernard Rose wanted Eddie Murphy to be Candyman, but they couldn't afford it.
Whoa, like Beverly Hills Cop style, like the laugh and everything.
I mean, I'm guessing like he would have been. He would have been Mr. Candyman, which would have been
Eddie Murphy's he's a relatively a small person though. Like, he's not tall, right? Or am I?
Yeah, I think he's like my size. He's not a towering figure.
Yeah, it'd be like Tony Todd is so like tall and like
menacing,
bulky, and scary looking. So I think they did the right thing.
Yeah,
because I can't imagine like a 5'7" urban legend going. Talk like,
hey everybody. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so here's the
be my victim.
Do it. So the official synopsis is the Candyman, a murderous soul with a hook for a hand, is accidentally summoned to reality by a skeptic grad student researching the monster's myth. The tagline reads, "We dare you to say his name 5 times." And then this is the movie we got.
I think that synopsis isn't right at all.
No, it's selling it as a see that's scary sounding. Like, as a 10-year, 7 or 8-year-old, I'm like, fuck this movie. I will not say his name 5 times. And then the poster had like a creepy figure with a hook, like just a silhouette of a dark figure with a hook, and then a freaking bee on the eye, like about ready to sting it. And I was just like, what the fuck is this? I am not watching whatever this is. This has too much going on.
Yeah, and I'm just like, that's this rewatch, not to jump ahead too far and everything, but I really like, there's no solid answer that Candyman, like the myth, the urban legend, is real. Like this could all be her snapping under the process of her research and trauma and stuff. Like it could just be her the entire time.
Maybe.
Like you can watch the movie that way.
I think,
no?
Well, I mean, she at least, yeah, I mean, he fully cannot. If you're saying like the legend in the story fully exists because she has conversations. Yeah. So legend
the murders
exists
and
and
stuff.
predates. Yeah. And the history of the legend is all real. But especially on the rewatch, I was like, ooh, this plays like a good, like, dual watch. Is like, is he real, or is just is that the snapping point for her? Although Candyman, what is fascinating here for me is that, well, maybe this is better for the end. Let's kind of like, we don't have to fully like do what we normally do, but we can just set the table for what the actual story is and who Helen is. So you want to take that off? Who is Helen, and what the fuck is she doing in Chicago?
See, we have no tracks. We're just walking like, let's talk about Helen. Okay, let's go.
I mean, the movie could be called Helen because it's really a movie about
Helen.
I mean, it's a pretty feminist
Helen.
movie.
You gotta say it 5 times.
Yeah. Helen.
But she's our protagonist, I suppose. And is she like postdoctorate? Is she studying to
she's a grad
professor
student?
Yeah, grad school. And she's doing a study on urban legends and how they spread, basically, with her friend Bernadette. Is that right? Is that what her friend's name was? I believe that's
yes.
Bernadette Rose. Man, Bernie put himself in this movie as a lady. But yeah, and she's married to, it looks like a tenured faculty member who's got people fawning all over his intellectual magnitude, and he is teaching about urban legends very dismissively, and so there's conflict there. So she is out with an attitude to like prove these patriarchal faculty members that she's going to find the truth about these urban legends. And I will say it's very interesting. They're having the dinner party, and there's like the stodgy British professor that's already done all the research. And he's like, "Oh, you should read my paper from 10 years ago." And she's like, "We will bury you." And that seemed like a really strange thing for her to say. But then I'm cutting to the end to spoiler. Is he's standing there when she's literally buried. I'm like, whoa. Think about that.
Well, it's a there's multiple times this happens in this movie, but like to me, this movie is surprisingly a feminist film. I'm pretty much from the first scene. I mean, Helen is disregarded and treated pretty poorly by her colleagues, her husband, pretty much any male character in this film. And that's like one of the first moments is like everybody at that dinner party is like listening to him, and she was just trying to tell the same shit, and like they're like, "Oh, shut up, let's listen to this fat old British man speak about the same thing." And like,
there's a lot of that too, and we can get to that in a little bit too, but there's a lot of things that are really coming to light now, like as much as like white women have had to deal with feminism and like sexism and patriarchy and all that stuff, there's still a point of privilege that she has and that white women have in the culture, because when she meets the black mother and like what she has to live through and what her experiences are, that's kind of where this movie became super interesting to me, is because it does deal with like that system, the privilege that we all have. Like there's levels of persecution that we all feel, and we all have felt in our life. Like we've all been bullied, we've all had like strikes against us from the beginning, but we also have like innate social privileges. Like you and I are like at the apex, we get to be white dudes, we get like all the general like social privileges. Then it kind of goes down, and this movie kind of explores how she doesn't even really recognize that, like that her privilege puts her above certain other people's experiences. And that's kind of what she goes through, this layer of like Dante's hell to like experience what racism is and what sexism within racism is, and like it's not. Okay, this is gonna sound rambly, but I really love where this movie switches because she finds the gangster guy who claiming Candyman, like the real life guy that carries around the hook. Like she does all her research, and she finds this like tangible guy who's a criminal who's done like killed that woman in the projects, and he's done all these terrible things. And he
He
finds
may have
her, and
castrated a child.
yeah, he definitely did, according to the stories.
Well, yeah,
But
according to the kid. What's the kid's name?
I don't remember his name. I don't know if they ever say his name. But anyway, yeah, like they arrest him. She identifies him in a lineup. He's going to go to jail for a long time because as a white woman, she can testify without worrying about retribution in the project since she's got the privilege. So she's going to do that, and he's going to go away. And it's like this feel good moment, like where the white person comes in and saves the day, and everything's better, like those movies, like the white hero movies. But then Candyman, the real Candyman, shows up, and he's basically like, no, it's not that simple. Like racism is this. It is me. It can't go away. This is systematic. This is like everything. And it just drives her to madness. And that's why this movie gets like super interesting to me. Like you could pick apart little scenes and what they mean, and it's pretty hefty. I mean, made by like a white British dude in the '90s, like it's got a lot to say. It's pretty accurate to current events.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, so Helen is a grad student researching urban legends. This brings her to the north side of Chicago, a place called Cabrini Green, which is a real place. And per my very, very quick research, there's my notes here. Cabrini Green and the Cabrini Green homes had existed for almost like, well, they no longer exist. They were demolished in 2011, but they had existed for, I think they were founded in like they were built in like the 40s, sometime in the 40s. But this whole area, like the north side, had long had like issues. There were shanties there at one point. There was, there was always like crime, like from, and it wasn't, like it eventually does become a very black driven neighborhood and black owned and lived. But originally it was a lot of Swedish people, a lot of Irish people, and the same things were happening there. I mean, in the 40s when it was built, it was prominently white. And then eventually they built this big high rise, which is in the film, the home extension, Cabrini home extension is what they called it. And that was sponsored by, I think it was the first thing in Chicago that the Chicago Housing Authority ever spent money on. And basically this was like, the whole program was like a discrimination, like attempt by a bunch of white people to segregate all black people in this area, which they were actually like sued for and lost. But that didn't stop it from happening. Like they basically created an area, and as time went on, like they put all these people there, and it became a place of crime and violence and neglect by the city, and literally was falling apart and deplorable, and they were still putting people there for Section 8 housing, and then it just went to ruins in like the 90s. And they slowly demolished it and finished in the late 2010s. But yeah, I mean, it was just like row houses and big high-rise apartments that were built, and just forgotten by the city. And it's a very, very sad story.
I didn't realize that was a real place until you told me that. I figured it would just be a fictional place, but that makes the movie even more powerful, I guess, because it's not fictional. Like this is a place, and this really happens. I also love that she lives in that building that was built the same as the projects, but since she's in the white area, the affluent area, she like paid a bunch of money for this fancy condo thing, but it's the same construction and it's the same skeleton. But one is the projects and one is some affluent like apartments that like some professor lives in and stuff. Just the lines we draw, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's wild, like that this is real and it was updated. I'm guessing I wish I read more about why he thought this was fascinating, but it was a very public, like in the 90s, this was a very public, like there was a lot happening in Cabrini
Yeah.
Green on a national level. So I'm guessing his attention just went to that, and then he
Hmm.
did more research from there. But I mean, they tried on and off to try to control the crime, and that was like kind of the big thing, is like Chicago and Chicago's mayor and police department were just losing this battle, because they had just forgotten it for so long. And like, you can only go so far before something's like beyond repair, beyond like
No, and
saving.
it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's like trying to put out a grease fire with the wrong thing. Like once there's other programs to like help people in the situation, and just cracking down on crimes, not really. Like if you attack it at the very end of this whole process, you're not really going to stop the beginning of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think people have found that. And I do think it's interesting, like you were saying, the short takes place in Great Britain, and they also have like a really big history of like projects and putting people in slums and like slumlords and all, like, so I think maybe that's the parallel he was trying to cross the pond there.
Yeah. Um, so she's researching this fictional character, and it draws her to Cabrini Green, where she's told by a resident, or she's told by, do they live there, or are they supposed to be like cleaning ladies, or she's told by two people that just
I
happen
think
to
one
be.
of them, the one that gets pulled in, I think, because it starts off at first, you're like, oh, whatever. Because she's like, oh, it's my friend's cousin's. You know how every urban legend is, like my friend's cousin's sister. This happened to like so far
Was
removed.
killed by
Yeah,
Candyman
and
here.
she's like, well, can I talk to your friend? And she's like, yeah. And her friend's out in the hallway, and I believe she lives in that area, and she was like privy to a lot of that. Yeah.
Well, then her and her friend kind of like, as they talk about the urban legend after this initial sequence of learning about how their friend is killed, they're like having a glass of wine, and then they're like, oh, let's just do it. They go to the mirror and they say Candyman 5 times, which is what they're told not to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then this sparks Helen deciding that this is her thesis, and that she's going to talk about how these residents of Cabrini Green are coping with their hardships, because
Yeah,
through this
real
urban
murder
legend,
with, yeah.
Candyman. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, but what's fascinating is Helen is married to, I don't have his name, but he is,
He's every white professor in the world.
every white professor in the world, and he is played. The guy who plays him is incredible, and I cannot remember his name. I have to look him
Yeah,
up
he's one of
because
those guys. Like you see his face, and you're like, "Oh, I've seen him in things," but no
there
one
he is.
knows his
He's in
name.
Terminator 2 is mostly what I recognize him for.
Oh yeah,
He's
he's
the
the
shitty
dad,
dad.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's mostly what I remember him from. That's all you need to know. He's the shitty dad
he's
in
kind of,
Terminator 2.
yeah, same character basically. Now that you
Oh
say
yeah,
that,
I mean, except for like that's like the white trash version of him in Terminator 2. Okay, so this sends Helen on her journey to learn about Candyman, and most importantly, I guess what we learn about is who Candyman was, and who the actual man
hmm
was behind the legend, which every legend has a true story, right? That's what makes them so.
or even like mildly true, like things
Yeah,
that can't be traced. Like there was someone lynched here, but then there's all these flourishes that can't be like
I
proven
mean,
actually happened. Like the bees and the hooks and all that sounds. That's like strife with urban legend.
built up
Like
over years, right?
yeah, yeah. Like if this really was like an urban legend we all heard, that would be the if I was an academic, those would be like those little symptoms that you're like, oh yeah, this like embellishment and flourishment has gone over the time, and you go from one project to the next, and there'd be something else. Like sometimes they'll have like an army of bees behind him,
Yeah,
things that change.
I
But
mean, urban legends are just like the cool version of like conspiracy theories. They're all
I do want.
rooted. They all start in the reality, and there's like, they're only like fun to talk about and discuss because they start and they're rooted in something real.
Mhm. And they are similar, like what we've talked about in horror is like this. It's a way. It's like a fun way to like scare each other and like deal with these really dark issues in this like contained way, where like boogity, like it's like a very safe way to deal with humanity darkness stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's interesting that they can't say, like, I don't know, you can't say Candyman 5 times or this all happens. And I think that's more than a little less than subtle way to say, like, when people talk about racism, like, you can't talk about racism because then you have to acknowledge that it's real. And I think that's kind of what this movie's doing. Like, don't do it. don't you talk about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the character of Candyman is originates from Civil War era. It was a black man who was accepted into white society. He was a well-known artist during that time, and all the landowners loved him, the kids loved him. And then here's the hiccup. The hiccup was that he fell in love with a white woman and was going to have a child with her, or did have a child with her. And then all the white people lost their minds, and then they lynched him. And then this is where the story becomes urban legend. They cut off his hand and with a saw, and then they smeared honey all over him, and then he was stung to death by bees. And then they burned him, I think, right? And then they put him over where this area was, Cabrini Green, right? Supposedly. In that area. And that's where the legend that she's told, that's basically the quick version of it. So it's a very tragic story, even if it's just this man who, was accepted, but everyone turned on him because he was a black man who loved a white woman, and that was not accepted, and it was punishable horribly by death. And this way obviously I don't think we're ever meant to believe that this is real, like that he lost his hand and smeared it in honey and then stung to death and then burned and spread across the land. But it's not too far off by like the crazy shit that happened in that time.
No, I mean, even recent times.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. But yeah, I also think like that, like she sees the urban legends as academic, which is interesting. But then once she actually gets in Cabrini Green and like converses with people who live this every day and stuff, it becomes like this new level of real, like of coping with it. And that's kind of interesting to me too. It's like, because you can talk about this all day long. Like we can talk about this all day long, but when you live in the areas where those actually were developed for coping or whatever, then it's an entirely different experience. And like before I go on, can I just talk about, just to lighten the mood a little bit, is as a grown man, I was almost envious of Candyman because like he has the best tailor. Like how good does he look? Like seriously. Like his clothes are like, I need a suit like that.
Well, here's how Clive Barker described him in the Candyman and the Forbidden Story. I wrote this down because he has such an interesting fashion in the movie.
Yeah.
In the story, he was described as such. He was bright to the point of gaudiness. His flesh was a waxy yellow. His thin lips pale blue. His wild eyes are glittering as if their irises are set with rubies. His jacket was a patchwork, and his trousers are the same. He looked, Helen thought, almost ridiculous with the blood-stained motley and the hint of rouge on his jaundiced cheeks.
So it does sound like he's trying to be a little bit fabulous.
Yeah.
But this Candyman, like everything fits him so well. Like he's gotten fitted and like, yeah, his inseams on point. He's got that nice coat. He's got like this, like that fancy shirt with the kind of ascot-y actually. Like he's.
Here's some interesting facts about the story though. In the short story, Candyman's race, his actual real name, place of origin, his backstory, they're never brought up, nor is saying Candyman 5 times in the front of a mirror. None of that exists in the book. That's all stuff that was created by Bernard Rose, which is fascinating. And I'm like, what the fuck is the book?
That makes sense too. If it's a short story, you don't have to get into that stuff as much. But if you're telling like a longer form story, you gotta.
Yeah, that's true.
Give that.
I mean,
and his shoes are always. Sorry, I keep talking about his fashion. I was really impressed with his fashion, but his shoes were like so shiny. Like he'd gone to get them shined like all the time. Like you think like walking through Cabrini Green and being a monster, you get some scuffs.
Yeah,
no scuffs. I'm impressed.
Here's the short stories. Here's how it's broke down in the story. Here's what they say the synopsis is. The Forbidden. A university student named Helen is doing a thesis on graffiti and selects a rundown estate to focus on her study. She notices disturbing graffiti in an abandoned building that makes references to an urban legend known as Candyman. Further inquiries lead her to believe that this is connected with recent murders and mutilations in the neighborhood, although the locals are seemingly reluctant to discuss the incidents. She eventually encounters the Candyman herself, gaining notoriety by becoming his latest victim.
Mm-hmm. Do they? And yeah. So I mean, similar, but yeah, there are a lot of like noticeable differences there.
I mean, I guess like his influence probably saying Candyman 5 times was, I don't know how popular it was, but Bloody Mary certainly
Yeah.
existed in that time frame. So, and just I guess he just had to build the urban legend a little bit more. So
Mm-hmm.
taking elements from that um, is interesting. But he just the fact that he like built this like strong like movie about racism and sexism is pretty fascinating, I think.
Yeah. Well, it ends with like the monster she becomes at the end is something completely different than what Candyman was.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like she's a whole other urban legend / morality play because now she's haunting like the unfaithful husband. Like she's the jilted, like betrayed person who's coming to deal with this like sexist cheating piece of poo at the end. Like so her like it just kind of
That's
flips.
actually how it's written in the script, I believe.
Yeah. That's his character name.
Yeah. Um so I mean we won't go too much further in what happens in the actual movie, but we can talk about what happens and what we think it means. So again,
Mm-hmm.
like per every episode, there's no reason to be listening to this unless you've already seen the film, because we're
Mm-hmm.
just gonna pretty much be spoiling it, because that's what these are all movies you should see or should see before listening to it. For
Yeah,
deep
and we
dives
should probably
conversation.
we should probably do a better job. We should like post what we're gonna do like on a Wednesday or something. Give people like 5 days to watch.
That's
Because
true.
right now we're giving like a day notice,
You
if
have
that.
5 minutes.
Like, we'll see you. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope you.
So,
Yeah, I hope you can buy it in the next 5 minutes. Yeah. So this movie, where are we at, and what happens? Well, basically, like what's interesting that you brought up, was more fun, quote unquote, fun to watch as just a movie, was the fact that, is Candyman even real, or is this
yeah.
just like taking over her life? Is this all that she can think about? And is she herself killing all these people around her?
I think
Or
she
is he
is,
framing her?
honestly.
I do
No,
too.
I think it's her. But I mean, they're pretty explicit about it with like, because I think that fits into this racism narrative because she's like the blonde hair, blue eyed white person,
Mm-hmm.
and he says several times it's always been you. And there's like paintings of her back then being one of the lynching parties things. And I think like the way I read it now is it's kind of attacking before all this was a phrase, the white fragility of people who like I don't see color, I don't have a racist bone in my body, all these people where they don't want to talk about race. They're like, oh, I'm not racist, I have black friends, but they can't admit and they can't talk about like how systematically every like things that they've participated in, things that they do, like builds this racist like machine we have, and we all play a part, like whether we want to or not. Like it's just the system, and becomes haunted by that. And I think that's kind of what happens is like she does traditionally what movies do when the white person comes and saves the black people from this like bad guy. She does that, but then she just snaps, and I think that's because she realizes, yeah, he's gone, but there's this whole system still here. The Cabrini Green is still here. There's still crime. There's still like poverty. There's still racism. And I think that's what Candyman's confronting her with is like, it was always you. You play a part in this. You are like, you have racism. Like, and she just kind of falls apart, I think.
Yeah. Um, You cut out for a second again. So I heard most of it. But I'm gonna let you edit this part out so I can think about what I can say in response to so what you did. But well, the it was always you, Helen, is I think one of the most important parts that points to the fact that we know Candyman's an urban legend. Everyone's talked about it, but the impact on her life and what it's caused. I mean, I have to. I mean, there's no real through line to who she's killing. Like you could say, like, well, her husband was a piece of shit, and he was. I mean, at the end, we're given like he's already moved on in a new life with one of his students.
Arguably, before she went crazy, who was
Oh,
already
for
doing
sure.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, for sure led to believe that he was always a piece of shit. But then I'm trying to think like she kills her friend, and then she also kills there's three people who get killed.
The doctor too.
The doctor, doctor was kind of a piece of shit. I was okay with that one. And then there's one more person, or is that it? Is
No,
just
that's
those
it.
three?
Like, well, she attacks that mother with the cleaver, but she doesn't kill her. Like when she wakes up, and the baby is gone,
and she's in a crazed state. Yeah. So you're probably right that.
Well, I just for the first half of the movie, I'm just like I was kind of throwing this movie away as like it was a time of the 90s and they needed a white lead to carry this movie about black issues, and she's just kind of there as like our like someone to relate to. You know how racist movies were back then. And
yeah.
But then I like once that flipped, I think there's a real intent and like purpose for a white woman to be the like lead of this movie. And that's what I was just saying is like just the whole horror of this is she has to confront her own place in all of this and the spread of racism as an urban legend, like something that we talk about in the shadows, but no one really wants to deal with or look into the mirror and see it. That's my take. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think with the intent. I mean, Bernard Rose's intent here is so, I think, finely tuned. I don't think it was an accident who he casted and how he cast them, except for when he was going to cast Eddie Murphy. That would have been wild. I need to see that dark timeline where that exists. But yeah, I mean, I think the movie is just so. It works on so many levels. Like, I think if you want to watch it as just like a film, maybe it's not as like. It's definitely not a roller coaster ride of like horror. And
I will say it made me jump. I don't jump in movies very often anymore. This movie made me jump, I think, at least twice. So it has some horror elements in there. Like if that's what draws you to these things.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he comes out of the mirror, like the claw.
Oh yeah, it's got some very good jumps, and the unrated one has some great gore. In particular, when we talk about Dr. Burke's death, it's very different from the other one, and it's much gorier. But again, like today, it's like pretty commonplace for the gore. But the Candyman, like even like revisiting it, it's interesting to revisit this movie. Because they already speak so strongly about race and sex. So it will be, while I'm very excited to see what Nia DaCosta and Jordan Peele do, it's like, how can you almost one up this movie?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm interested to see too. I don't know. Yeah, I'm excited to see it from that shadow puppet thing. It just seems like it's going a lot harder at like the slavery like institution of this whole culture, this whole civilization that was founded on forced labor. Like that's kind of where they're going. But I'm really interested to see it. I'm excited.
I'm fully in. I'm there day one.
I do want to like. I'm just kind of like jazzing now, but I'm thinking about this more in the ending and the burning pyre and all that stuff. Like that has some lynching items to it, like witches and like lynching of like black people, like has some history there. Mm-hmm. But it also, she comes crawling out with like new life with the baby. Like she gives her life for this baby, and it's like, is that our rebirth? Like, is it like a phoenix rising from the ash kind of thing? Is that what they're going with? Or am I getting too crazy here?
Well, I mean, because she's not actually alive at that point, right? She's like
no, but she brings out
saving the baby.
Yeah, she brings out this. Yeah, like she
Well,
saves.
is that to like, is that her like, by learning our past, we can actually hopefully make a better future. Like, here's our
Yeah,
literal like future, this baby, and
yeah,
if
that's kind of what I'm
we
thinking.
teach it the right shit, like it'll be
Yeah,
better.
like if we sacrifice our own, like, I don't know, pride and disillusionment and whatever, like the way we lie to ourselves, and bring this in, then maybe we can get somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just jumping. I'm trying.
No, I mean, I think it has to play a purpose, right? Like Candyman's like, come with me and you'll live
It's very,
forever.
yeah, and it's very
And
dramatic the way she, like, yeah, shelters, like she protects the child and lets herself burn and all that.
yeah, and then but her urban legend, we don't really learn too much about. But she saves this child
Yeah,
under this,
I think she's, yeah, I think she's just a ghost that comes and kills sleazy men. I think that's that's her new job.
well, we never got the Helen movie because Tony Todd was so fascinating in this role. Like everyone just said, let's just do more of that, even though like his story is fully wrapped up in this. So
He's
I'm,
also probably the sexiest monster. Like he just has
uh,
some sex appeal. Like
yeah,
it's
I
just like,
mean,
whew.
I just revisited Night of the Living Dead 1990, and I'm just like, just chill, bro. You're just like like 90s Tony Todd is just
I know.
absolutely yeah.
He's just seeping with something, and you're just like, oh my, like Tony Todd.
I mean, yeah, I mean Tony Todd. Yeah, it's actually pretty fascinating because both Night of the Living Dead's, Dwayne Jones and Tony Todd are just both like these ridiculously good-looking and charming, black the only black characters in those films, and you're just like, fuck, who can even watch this movie without thinking about like Dwayne Jones is just like how is he not one of the biggest actors at the time, other than like Hollywood was just racist and didn't think African Americans could lead films.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mind boggling because of that. But Tony Todd is just
Dripping with sex.
I mean, yeah, like I don't know what number 2 is, but it's called Farewell to the Flesh, and I'm just assuming he's fully naked in the whole movie. Yeah, but he's an interesting character because he is so. I mean, you don't even see. I don't even think he shows up to almost an hour into this movie. Like he's just
Yeah.
in graffiti and like drawings and books, and I think you might hear his voice in her.
Yeah, he does
Head a
like the
couple
beginning.
times.
Well, in the beginning, he does like his little prologue too.
Oh yeah,
But that's it. But
um,
and it is interesting because most of our monsters have been like disfigured or wear masks and stuff up to this that I can think of off the top of my head. Besides, but like I guess Psycho, and there's some exceptions in there, but he's like full on like metrosexual, handsome monster. It's an interesting choice.
yeah. What else about this film, Mike? What else do you wanna chat about? I mean, we already kind of covered.
I I am rethinking now, and I'm sure someone's maybe yelling at our podcast, but like when they're looking at the painting and he's saying it was always you, is he referring maybe to the woman that he, like she's like the
Oh yeah,
reincarnated version of like
that's kind
the woman he
of. I
had
have her name.
relations with?
I have her name
Is that
somewhere.
because she's painted in there? I didn't know if she was just part of the lynching party or if she was supposed to be his interest. Was that like his painting of her there since he's the artist?
I mean, he is the artist, and
Whew. I guess she does like carry out a child too, and she like her ancestor, if that's her, was pregnant with his child. So that brings a whole other thing to this Candyman thing, like father, mother, and child in that fiery pier.
yeah, and the only one that goes for it is like their baby.
Yeah. Hmm.
Mm.
See,
But
I'm just. Oof. Maybe we should have. Wow. I'm glad we don't have tracks because we just hopped over to like a wild one.
interesting. Well, another thing we didn't talk too much about is how everybody around her is consistently dismissing. We did talk about that, but it goes from dismissal to she's fully insane to the point to where they don't like her friend is murdered in her apartment with her, and she's committed to the insane asylum. There's no like question about it. Like she's off the deep end and she's fully insane, and nobody believes her ever at any moment, including her friend. Like it's just like Helen's lost her mind, and Helen goes up even to the point to where even if Candyman were real, he is the one, like we're shown doing stuff. Obviously, we also see her hands covered in blood, and she's covered in blood.
Mm-hmm.
But even if she's telling the truth, like the consistent dismissal of her accounts is pretty fascinating. I mean, it happens all the way to the end, to where Candyman's the only person she can actually even believe in or trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what does that say, Eric?
Oh, man, right at the end of the podcast, we're bringing all these like hefty things to consider. I'm not sure. Oh, like, I don't know. What do you think? You brought this up.
I don't know. Well, and I guess also fascinatingly, like when she does die, and like that all that really does happen because the residents, like during her funeral, like all the residents throughout Cabrini Green come to her gravesite, and are kind of like showing respect, and then at the end, the next scene, like a newfound fear in this character of Helen.
Yeah, that's true. Like, yeah, there's a lot loaded there that we probably need to unpackage too. Just the funeral scene, honestly, like, and that they all come and pay tribute, because that leads credence to like at least them believing that it wasn't her fully, that the Candyman legend was responsible for this, and that she sacrificed herself for their, like, quote unquote, their child's behalf. So there's a whole thing there.
Yeah, I don't know. This movie just it's a terrific film, and I think you can. It's one it's rather short. It's 96 minutes, I think, something like that. It's one that's easy to rewatch over and over again, and kind of pick apart all these nuanced ideas and nuggets of possible truths. It's yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably one of the best movies in the 90s, horror films for sure.
I think so, yeah. Like, I forgot, like, a lot of these movies we've been watching are interesting, and you can talk about it. You can find things to talk about it. But like, this is, besides Jaws, really, that I can think of off the top of my head, like, this is like a legitimately timeless, well-made, all-around movie where it's just like, this is great. This is one of those things we'll be discussing. Yeah, we'll be just. I mean, we still are 30 years later, but it's just a movie you'll still be discussing, and that's great.
Yeah,
you love a lot of horror movies,
and yeah, our second Clive Barker. So
I know.
I mean, at this point, we might as well finish with the big one he did. But yeah, so Candyman 1992, we both loved it. It's more relevant than ever. I think we can continue to talk about it and pick it apart. It's one I honestly probably watch again after just chatting about it right now, because it is like, it's not a fun movie. It's an easy movie to watch, and it's made so well. And we didn't even talk about the Philip Glass score, which is just great.
And that Ted Raimi shows up as a bad boy teen at the beginning. Oh, that was one of my. I was like, yeah, I saw Philip Glass pop up. I'm like, what? Philip Glass? This is amazing. And I did forget how great this score is, like from the Candyman theme to like the choral stuff. It's amazing. But yeah, just casting Ted Raimi as the like bad guy, badass leather jacket teen boy. Oh,
yeah, it's yeah, this movie is really, really well done, and I look forward to. I mean, we'll probably do an episode whenever the new one comes out, talking about what they did differently and how they perpetuate the legend of Candyman.
Are we doing Lord of Illusions? Is that what you're saying next time?
Oh shit, I've never seen that.
I don't remember it.
Oh,
I think I have, but I don't remember anything about it. I'm looking at the picture, and
that's one that like the cover art always threw. I will say this a number of times. I was so influenced by the cover art of VHSs and DVD boxes that there's so many movies that I just didn't watch because they had bad cover art. And Lord of Illusions has a fucking trash, like
Yeah, it's
really
got
really
like
90s effects on it. It
it's
just
got
doesn't.
like David Copperfield looking person and Jesus
Mhm.
pose with like a light cross coming out of them and like people's faces swirling around them. And at the top it says, "Trust nothing except your fear."
It's just horror. I mean, it is just the worst looking. Yeah, if yeah, I mean, we should watch this because I've never seen it, but it was like this and like the war. Just I just thought this was gonna be Warlock is all I thought, and I'm like, I already saw Warlock, and I don't think I want to watch this. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Lord of Illusions is great. I don't think it is, but yeah. I don't know. Let's check
Uh,
it out. Let's
yeah,
wrap it. Let's wrap this up. Where can people find us, Eric?
oh God, I know we're on the Twitters and we're on the Facebooks. What it's like Nightmare Powered or Nightmare Power. Ooh, Nightmare
Ooh,
Hour
Nightmare
Pod.
Power. You can email us at nightmarehourpod@gmail.com. You can
Yeah.
find us on Facebook and Twitter at Nightmare Hour Pod as well. And yeah, as always, you could send us emails for your questions, comments, concerns, or ideas for future topics. We'll try to get a guest on here soon. It's been a minute since we've done that.
Yeah.
So we'll do that here sooner than later. And yeah,
Maybe we should do a watch along with everybody. Like schedule something for a few weeks out and do like a live movie thing like on our Facebook page or something.
I'm sure there's something coming to the Netflix or something that we could all do a live watch party. Is that what you're
Yeah.
trying to?
And
Is
then we
that what
could
you want to do?
record it. Yeah. We could like
Oh,
have people join
people
in
just
and
like
chat.
they can chat on the side and they'll watch this live.
Yeah. And we
All
watch
right,
a movie, watch us watch a movie.
I like it. Well, maybe it'll be Lord of Illusions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed another conversation here. This has been fun. I feel like we both got a little bit more energy today. We did it a little bit later in the day. We still haven't done one during the evening where we're having beers.
Yeah, we need
we
that.
need to get back to that.
That's where I'm at my best. Is like 2 beers.
Yeah, we're both little sleepy guys. I don't know why we started doing these in the morning because there's literally no reason. We just started doing. I think we did one at 10 a.m. and we're like, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Yeah, you good? See,
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, please like and share and comment. And
Please like us.
and review, of course, because that's how we can build this podcast. Until next week. The hour may be over, but the clock keeps ticking. This is the Nightmare Hour podcast. Thanks for listening.
Oh, you did that really fast. You're like, okay, we're done now. Goodbye.
Oh, shit.
I liked it though.